Paul Fosterville.
E te mana whakawātua roa tēnā koe. Sir, I'm speaking against the Charter Schools application of Official Information and Ombudsman Act bill for several reasons. But first I just want to reflect on the fact that...
Order. Can I ask the member to resume his seat? And I will get him to start again. But Ms Delahunty and Mr Seymour, can you quieten your discussion down, sit next to each other? Well, I was going to suggest you go outside, but that could cause all sorts of problems. We will start Mr Fosterville's speech again. Paul Fosterville.
Well, sir, I don't know if you were inviting them to have a fight or what, but look, sir, in restarting my speech, I want to reflect on what the previous speaker was talking about, because it strikes me that it was a rehearsal of the ideological arguments against charter schools per se, rather than a discussion around the application of the Official Information and Ombudsman Acts to charter schools. So this is obviously an area that we take some interest in on the Government Administration Committee, where I usually sit. We dealt with the Official Information Act insofar as it applies to Parliamentary Undersecretaries bill, which came through this House recently, and which the Government did support through, so that Mr Seymour, the only current Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State, is now subject to the Official Information Act. And I'd point out at the time that Mr Seymour discussed it at quite some length, what proactive steps he takes to make available information that is of interest to the public, particularly in the range of portfolios. He has some wonderful portfolios, the most tremendous portfolios. He's got small business. He has obviously the Undersecretaryship to the Minister of Education. So this bill, I would argue, Mr Speaker, is unnecessary. So Mr Seymour, insofar as he has parliamentary responsibility for charter schools, is subject to the Official Information Act. But I think it would create something of an unfortunate precedent to make what are non-state institutions subject to Official Information Act and the Ombudsman Act. The Ministry of Education does collect significant data from charter schools, or as we prefer to call them, partnership schools. And this information, of course, is subject to the OIA and review by the actions of the Ministry of Education are subject to review by the Ombudsman. The member who spoke previously did touch at length on the issue of bullying, harassment, and these issues in schools, and this is something I personally feel very passionate about. It is not only in the private, the independent and the state integrated education systems where bullying exists, it's also, unfortunately and tragically, throughout our public education system also. So there are many schools which are wonderful examples of good practice in this area, but there are public schools, sadly, that we can point to where bullying of children for all sorts of reasons, be it their religious background, their ethnic background, or their sexuality, is pervasive. This is something I feel very strongly on, and I don't think the application of the Official Information Act or the Ombudsman Act to a charter school will help a single child in that area. And if I did, I'd be crossing the floor and I'd be voting for this bill. The kinds of measures that will help those children who are subject to that kind of bullying, directions and encouragement and prioritisation of the Educational Review Office to add homophobic bullying, or bullying in the widest possible sense, to the list of items which they review when they go into schools. So currently they look at the safety of buildings, they look at educational attainment achieved by students, they look at many other things, and I'd be very much in favour of the Educational Review Office taking a greater level of interest or a higher priority to homophobic bullying in particular, but bullying more widely. But I think this bill, as it has been proposed, doesn't actually do anything to contribute to greater safety of our students in schools. And let's face it, under the current excellent and outstanding Minister of Education, the Honourable Hekia Parata, our schools are being well run and being better run all the time. And this has been reflected in the PISA results that we've seen, where New Zealand has climbed up the international league tables. And Mrs Martin may be unable to comprehend the league tables that we've recently seen. But this bill, as far as I see it, does nothing to improve the quality of education enjoyed by New Zealand children, which has gone up under the John Key-led government and under the leadership of the Honourable Hekia Parata, who will probably be remembered as one of the finest, if not the finest, Minister of Education that this country has ever seen. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a bill which, you may have picked up a theme here, sir, this is a bill which I see as an ideological knee-jerk reaction to charter schools, and emphasis on the jerk when it comes to knee-jerk. I think it's something that this House should reject as unnecessary and something which does nothing for the quality of education in New Zealand.